to the Unstoppable Recording Machine Podcast, brought to you by IK Multimedia. IK Multimedia gives musicians access to the most famous and sought-after guitar gear and studio effects of all time with our Amplitude and T-Rax analog modeling software. Now, IK has created the ultimate all-in-one bundle for bands and engineers, the Total Studio 2 Max, combining all of IK's award-winning amps, effects, sounds, and more. It's everything you need to track, mix, and master your music. IK Multimedia, musicians first. For more info, go to www.ikmultimedia.com. And now your host, EYAL Levy.
This show is brought to you by Academy, the world's best education for rock and metal producers. Every month on Nail the Mix, we bring one of the world's best producers to mix a song from scratch from artists like Meshuggah, Periphery, A Day to Remember, and Bring Me the Horizon. And we give you the raw multi-tracks so you can mix along. You'll also get access to MixLab, our collection of bite-sized mixing tutorials, and Portfolio Builder, pro quality, multi-tracks cleared for use in your portfolio. You can find out more at nailthemix.com. Welcome to the URM podcast. I'm EYAL Levy. With me is Mr. Marc Mcclusky, a multi-platinum award-winning producer, mixer, and composer based in New York. He has multiple top 5 Billboard albums and a #1 album on iTunes. He's worked with artists such as Weezer, Bad Religion, Motion City Soundtrack, Everclear, many, many others. Marc is also a composer and mixer for TV, media, and film. His work has been seen on ESPN 30 for 30. Has done work for Coke, SAP, all kinds of stuff. And he owns and operates a drum sample virtual instrument company called Smack Drum Samples. So this guy does a lot of great work. Marc, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm glad we could finally make it work.
Yeah, this is great. I'm always happy to talk about life.
So, well, all right. So speaking of life, can you tell me a little bit about how you got started in your life of audio? Was it your original mission, or is it something that just kind of happened along the way?
So I think it probably started for like most people that end up in this field or a creative field is you're like a kid and like some of your first memories that you have are basically of music or some type of thing that has to do with music. So as far back as, exactly. Like everybody kind of has that one thing that they always gravitated towards. For me, when I was a little kid, I could remember the first time I can remember ever getting like an allowance or anything. I would just like beg my mom or dad or my aunts or uncles or whoever was around to take me to the mall so I could go buy albums. And that's kind of like where it started with me is like buying like, Michael Jackson and Huey Lewis and the News is probably like one of my favorite bands of all time. And like they really influenced me as, a music lover. So much so that whenever it is, you're in elementary school and you can go to start to have band class. So I wanted to go play the saxophone because of Huey Lewis and the News, but it was the 80s, so everybody wanted to play the saxophone. So they had an abundance of saxophone players, so I got stuck on the clarinet. So I played the clarinet for a while and then finally moved over to saxophone eventually. Started playing all the different saxophones that they have. And then when I started high school, the jazz band needed a drummer. So I volunteered to play drums. Oh, I also played snare drum in the regular band too before that. So I started doing that. I got more, you start to develop more of your own taste and you get more different genres of music. So I started gravitating towards punk a lot. I was a skateboard kid. So I was started writing my own songs, playing drums in jazz band.
So a punk musician that could actually play, like, I don't want to say real music because it's all real music, but
of
like
course.
A punk musician who could actually play in a technical way and was actually schooled in music. That's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, that's like been my thing is like my whole family is like super sciencey kind of brains. Like my sister's an engineer. She actually worked for NASA at one point. And my dad,
wow.
yeah, it's crazy. She's a very, very cool woman.
So like a real rocket scientist.
Yeah. Well, she deals in heat transfer. So like if something blows up and they want to know why, they like put this paperwork on her desk and, figure out why the heat went this way so you can, make that not happen again. And now she works for this company that does like nuclear power stuff. And she flies all over the world, like going to nuclear power plants to help try to cool their nuclear reactors more efficiently. So,
and that sounds like fascinating work. And not to be a bummer, but when you told me what she did, and we're talking about the 80s, the first thing that came to mind was being in school and watching the Challenger blow up.
Yeah.
I think that anyone that went to school in the 80s remembers that as one of the, it's like one of those things. Like you remember exactly where you were and what you were doing and everything about it. At least for me, it was that way. And so thinking about what she does now, that's just fascinating and super important too.
Oh yeah. I mean, she's an awesome sister. She's very cool, very smart girl, obviously, kind, and I couldn't ask for a better one.
So do you think that? So you're saying that your family are actually sciencey. Did that affect or influence your approach towards music and audio?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it very, very much to my core, it did. It's, I think about music it's math, it's basically the emotional math of harmony. So, humans, this is going to get ridiculous, but
that's okay.
Yeah. Humans, right? What do we do? Like everything, our whole existence is based off of frequency. Color is a frequency. We see frequency. We hear frequency. How often we go take a shit is a frequency. How often we eat is a frequency.
It should be.
Right. If everything's working right, then so your whole life is based off of how frequent something happens, right? So I never was the kind of guy when I started writing music and songs for myself. I wasn't the kind of person like I happened upon a riff or a thing and I was like, oh, cool, I'm going to use that. I would go, okay, cool, I'm going to use that. And I want to understand why I feel the way I do with these certain notes so I can repeat this process and I can use this process to get to other feelings. So I always
that's fascinating.
I loved. I mean, I still love it. I studied music pretty in depth. Your father, I think, is a composer, right? And a
conductor.
Yeah, conductor. Yeah, I mean that's awesome. I love the orchestra. Orchestra is like one of the most colorful things in the world. Like you can make so many beautiful colors with an orchestra. And if going back onto the math stuff, like it's I don't know. I just think about it like that. It's like I don't know if you remember in high school, like your science class project or whatever, where you have your hypothesis and everything. So like if you think about a song in that way, is like, okay, so if I want somebody to cry or do this, then well, what are my variables? What are my constants? And how do I fill in this equation to make them feel that way? And there's people out there that are like, theories there, I don't want to do the rules of it. And that's fine. You can totally do that. But either way, as a community of humans existing on Earth, we all sort of have a reaction to certain harmonic movements, content, or whatever you want to do, the tensions and releases of music. And
that brings up a really interesting point, though, a question I have, because so I went to Berkeley, and there were lots of professors there who viewed music as math and knew all the equations and taught you them. And I totally agree with you that is what music is. And they would talk about emotions much in the same way. However, while they knew this whole, I guess, one side of music inside and out, the technical side of the the technical side of the science, when I would hear their music, it would be the most boring, non-emotion inspiring garbage I've ever heard in my life. And lots of times you hear about some of the best writers, music writers, saying that they don't know any theory. So obviously they understand the equation on an intuitive level.
Yeah.
But so it's very rare, at least from what I've encountered, is for someone who understands both the math side of it and the emotional side of it, and then how to actually get them to work together. So what I'm wondering is, how do you actually think about it? Like, do you hear it or do you visualize it? Like when you're thinking about creating, like evoking an emotion, how does that translate in your mind?
Right. So that's actually a really good question. I've never been asked that before. So I still very much coming from punk rock, which is like some of the most basic on a musical level, right? Like if you're just looking at it for purely like the math side of it is very basic, right? And I love Green Day. Green Day is one of my favorite bands of all time. And
so good.
Yes. I mean, and that's the thing is, I feel that I don't take apart a Green Day song in my head harmonically until after I have like a feeling, right? And that feeling is what it is. And you got to remember, like you can translate a feeling. So going back to what you were saying about people with boring music, it might be that the textures that they're writing this music with are not very interesting, because a texture can change the feeling, right? You can play an E on a piano and just hammer the note softly, right? But that same note, and you hammer it as hard as you can, feels different. Like you don't feel the same. It's the same as like punk drumming or something like that, or jazz drumming, right? When you beat the shit out of the drums, it's the same snare, right? But it feels different. It just feels different. So I try to relate what I'm feeling and internalize that feeling. And then the process after that is to go, okay, why did I feel that way? Like what was happening with the color of the music, with the velocity of the music, with the harmony of the music, with the melody of the music, where was all that stuff coming together to make me feel that way? And then I try to use those things to build a tool bank or a toolbox of things that I can go to start there, and then flavor it to taste, like make it my own, or make it whatever artist I'm working with, or whatever picture I'm writing to, or whatever it is. So I try to build a toolbox of general ideas, right? Where I know if I start here, I feel personally this way, like I want to dance, or I want to cry, or I want to do this. And then I start there, and then I move forward and, try things. And I'm not sitting there calculating the whole time. It's like, well, I know if I play the 5 chord here, we're definitely going back to 1. I'm not thinking about that. I'm letting my emotion guide me, but then I'll review and understand what I did, because maybe there's a better option in there theoretically that I wouldn't do just playing it, right? Because it's like I'm not Herbie Hancock. Like I'm not the guy that can just like play the emotion that's like how do you say this, right? So you reverse it.
That is a pretty crazy skill, though. I think like the visceral, it's kind of like the visceral like translation of emotion into sound in real time. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I'm not that guy, and that's okay, because I know that I'm not that guy. But I feel that I'm the guy that can do something and feel a certain way, and then look at it and go, okay, well, we can enhance this by maybe trying this other thing, or this other thing will work, blah 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 blah. And doing score studies helps a lot too, right? Like if you go through and like E.T., everybody at the end of E.T. is like, man, fuck, that was awesome. So you go look at it, and it's Lydian. So then you go, okay, well, Lydian makes me feel that way. So how many different ways can I use Lydian? And then you play with Lydian.
And I guess it goes back to textures, because Lydian, you can hear Lydian used on a lot of guitar music, where it's just put you to sleep. But then you hear E.T., and it's one of the most unbelievable works of music ever. So, did you write this stuff down? I guess I assume you've been doing this for a long time. The analysis, is it something that you would write down like in English, or would you write down in notation, or just know it in your head? Like, how would you go about the actual analysis?
So yeah, I would just write. It's like a memory thing. Like there's not like a book I have where I go and like, pull through. It's just, I just know how I feel when I listen to music, and I'm just very aware of that. And I try to remember that feeling. And I try to also, another thing is I've always allowed myself to listen to music I don't like, because once you find that you understand what the artist is trying to do, you can appreciate it on a certain level that you probably may have not come to a certain conclusion just because you turned it off too quick.
So do you mean music that you don't like, or music that you actively dislike?
Yeah, I mean, both. Like, I'm not like a huge, like weird jazz guy. Like, I don't like atonal music.
Neither am I.
Yeah, I'm not into that, but still, I will sit down and I'll listen to it because there's some value in there. Like, great. I'm not going to sit down and listen to it, but I know atonal music makes me feel really uncomfortable. So if I'm scoring something, I'm going to write something with, an atonality to it to give people a really uncomfortable vibe. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's value in that. So.
Absolutely. Kind of an interesting situation. Not exactly what you're saying, though. I totally think that you should learn music that you dislike for those reasons. Just recently on Nail the Mix, like a year ago, actually, we had a guy named Billy Decker on, who's a amazing country mixer. He's had like 14 number ones, and he's just like a mix god, basically, for no other way to put it. And he mixes songs in like 45 minutes, and they sound incredible. And I don't like country, man. I just don't. Yeah. I never have. And there's just something about it that I don't like. It doesn't sit right with me. And Billy, if you're listening, I'm sorry. I love you and I love your work, but I'm just not a country fan. It's just not. And when we did Country Nail the Mix, we actually did 5 songs, and so I had to sit there with it. I had no choice. And the appreciation that I got for that world, I don't think that it would affect the way that I write or anything, but it's still this is still something tangible. The appreciation that I developed for that world and their level of standards for music, just the level of standards for what a good take is and what a good source sound is. Yeah. That is something that I would take with me everywhere, because I've never really heard like a genre that was so consistently high quality across the board. Because, I come from metal, and yes, sometimes in metal there's great musicians and great engineers, but for the most part, it's actually it's the art of making noise work. Yep. And lots of the musicians are terrible. And, I think it's pretty much the same in rock. Like, you have to work with a lot of elements that aren't supposed to work right. And there's something about, especially in metal, there's something about the whole metal world that's kind of unprofessional. And I mean, not to dog it, because it's where I come from, but like, there's just sometimes a lower bar at times. Not always. I mean, the best of the best are still the best of any genre are still world class, obviously. But when it's just seeing in country how good just your normal, but your baseline artists were, is because one of the artists, was diamond status, but then we had another artist that was just an up and comer and hadn't sold any records or anything. It kind of spanned the range, and there was it wasn't like the diamond artist had an incredible recording and the up and comer had like a demo quality. They were both top notch, and and so only through sitting there through something that I wouldn't choose to listen to did that really sink in. And I think it's the same with the artistic side of it, with writing, like you said, for sure.
I think, I mean, it's so funny when you started talking about country, that's right where my mind went. I was like, man, those guys' records always sound so good. Like they just
crazy.
They spend the time, you know? And, you know, I even on that note, on that thing is, you know, not to get like technical or start to talk about other stuff, but, you know, for me, and I'm sure you came up probably the same way because we're probably similar in age, is I started recording in my mom's garage on a boombox with like Radio Shack mics and like some shitty PVPA. So I like had to sit there and move mics for hours and turn volume, listen to it, go back, turn the volume again, because I couldn't post mix. Like there wasn't anything. It was 2 tracks into a tape. So I that's where I started doing.
I had a Walkman.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you learn how to like listen. And I don't think a lot of people do that anymore. It's like there's I say this often, is there's brilliance in silence. Like when you just stand back and observe and just take in what's happening and internalize it and then make a decision, you're gonna get results. I would imagine, at least for me, I'll speak. You'll get better results quicker with more of a direction than sort of happening upon something. And don't get me wrong, I'm all for throwing stuff in a room and just throwing it up and then making things work later, because then you'll get a really unique result, which is great. But you should learn how to have both sides of that coin, I think.
That reminds me, and I don't know if this is a common saying or something. It just reminds me of something one of my uncles said a long time ago, which is, and if this is a common phrase and there's a better way to say it, I'm sorry, please don't make fun of me on the internet, but is if you're in a hurry, drive slow. So you don't wreck or get pulled over, basically. But
yeah, exactly.
I feel like it's the same idea. And what's interesting too about the recording that method through the Walkman is, so I was a guitar player at that point. That's how I learned to make harmonies that actually worked. I mean, I understood harmony on paper because I studied it and it was taught to me, and both through like traditional studies and then my guitar teacher. But it wasn't until I started writing riffs and recording them on the Walkman and then hitting rewind and pressing play and having to come up with a harmony right then and there, that I couldn't record. So it would have to be good enough to remember, because I didn't have 2 tracks. It really, really focused my skills and my mind, and made it to where I could come up with pretty good stuff pretty fast.
Yeah.
And also like you said before, like you didn't write down, I guess, the toolbox of ideas. You kind of internalized it. So kind of like a mental toolbox through recording through that Walkman. It kind of created the same thing. It's almost like it worked on my instincts for knowing what notes work and which notes don't. I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah.
Did you ever hear people trying to write harmonies? It could be vocal or on guitar or whatever, and they're technically right. Like they're in key and all that. Like, you could, if you were in school, you could check off all the criteria,
boxes.
But something's wrong. Like, and they can't hear what's wrong with it. There's just something fucked with it.
Well, I don't mean to interrupt you. It's like, as soon as you said that, I can think of like exactly things. So like the common problems that I'll find, again, and this goes back to just like listening and going, okay, internalizing that. Wait a minute, I see what's going on here. Is people, a lot of punk rock or rock bands or people that aren't necessarily schooled in the theory of music, right? They'll sing something and they're like, that works, and it will work. But what they end up doing is they're not singing chord tones sometimes, and they're singing extensions. And then what they'll do is they'll build their harmony based on like what they know, right? Which is like you do a third above, right? So then you have your third, but you're building the third off of an extension. So you'll have like you're building these really bizarre chords that don't function.
It becomes a Schoenberg piece before you know it.
Yeah, and that's why they're like, well, it doesn't sound right, or something like that. Or another super common thing is right. So when I visualize an arrangement of a song, I picture a piano, and you have your kick drum and your bass guitar, obviously really low on your left hand, and then you have your baritone stuff, so whatever your guitar, right, and then you have whatever melody you're going to sing is usually somewhere in the middle, and then your high-end percussion and whatever leady stuff up top, right? And then, I always do this with bands, is I always say, now, how often do you see a piano player play in the exact same spot as his hand, as his right hand and his left hand? Are they ever playing on top of each other? And they're like, no. And I'm like, exactly. So you have too many things going on, and all your harmonies are becoming like half steps, right? So like another common thing, if we just stick to C major and we're playing an F, right? And then somebody's singing a C, so you're singing the fifth of F, and then somebody sings the E, which is the third above the C, but now you're singing an F major 7 chord, which is fine, but you're...
In some contexts.
Yeah, where you are in the keyboard is you might be right next to the octave guitar that you're playing that is literally a half step off, so you're going to get this really weird dissonance. So instead of like spread out your harmony or move your harmony up to the F, and then you're going to have a stronger feeling, and you're going to have more of a function in that chord.
That brings up also that I think that and I don't want to make this sound too caveman. But I think that one of the things that people love about Green Day, for instance, or in a whole other sphere, the band Muse, is that
I love Muse. Yeah,
it's very, very selective once you hear a seventh in there, anyways, to begin with. Yeah. It's pretty much just triads used to the highest level possible. Yeah. But they don't. Those bands don't even. You'll hear a seventh chord here and there, but it's really not. It's not just used to be used.
No, exactly. They have purpose.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess Green Day is a little more simple than Muse, but still, like I kind of see it the same way. They're just writing great songs, and just going about it different ways. But when it comes down to it, they're just great songs that you can remember and that strike those emotional chords. And like you said before, it's not overcomplicated.
No,
and that's actually what I think the professors that I encountered did wrong. Like, yes, you can put that major 7th chord there, but should you? And that's the question that they're answering. Yeah, they're not asking themselves that. It's like, just because you can or because it is technically right doesn't mean that you should.
Yes.
And you need to ask yourself that, or not ask yourself in a yes or no, but ask yourself that emotionally when you're creating this stuff, I think.
Yeah, I can 100% agree with you. Like, I'll go back to like what I said a little while ago, is there's brilliance in silence. Like you don't have to do stuff just because you know how to do it. And I encourage, if anybody finds any of the stuff we're talking about interesting, I encourage you guys to go listen to Jurassic Park. Da 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 da. Right, that thing, that little, literally, that is a 1-4-5 chord progression, and it's a triad, and it's awesome. Things like, if you look at a lot of John Williams' music, they're not these crazy chords. They're basic triads. He's just really clever.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's very, very clever. It's another really simple but super effective John Williams piece. Jaws.
Oh yeah, absolutely. 2 notes. Bum bum. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. It's like he knows everything you need to know, right? But he just picks the right notes. It doesn't matter how crazy it is. It's just make the right thing, and then obviously the texture, right? That same 2 notes on like a piccolo is not going to have the same effect as this.
Definitely won't.
Yeah, the same thing as this, like, nautical, very deep, dun dun. It's just, you get it. But yeah, that's the thing. Texture is a huge thing about music.
That makes me think actually of something that is kind of opposite, but it's I think it's structurally complex, but the delivery is very simple. Also, John Williams, I know where he I don't want to say ripped this from, but where he quoted it from in the Empire theme from Star Wars. I'm convinced that basically Shostakovich 10th Symphony Second Movement is basically the Empire theme. And I mean, I guess harmonically it's complex, but it's so bombastic in the way that it's approached. And I think that it speaks to that texture where if you had something that was that harmonically dense, just played blandly or on the wrong instruments or whatever the case may be, it might just sound like noise to you. Whereas the way, and if anyone wants to hear it, just go check out Shostakovich 10th Symphony Movement Number 2. It's just heavy and bombastic, and it works, but it works because I think there's a simplicity in the way that it comes off. In the dynamics, there's a simplicity there.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah.
But
Look, if you want your mind blown, just go listen to King's Row and you'll just hear where the temp music for Star Wars came from. If you guys want to dig into John Williams, where he gets a lot of his ideas from, is Holst. So the Planets has a lot of influence on him. And then King's Row. It's a movie from I think the 40s that Ronald Reagan starred in. And it's literally you'll in the first 5 or 20 seconds, you'll be like, oh my God, it's crazy. But I mean, look, the first rule in music, at least in symphonic music and scoring, is steal. Literally, steal and then make it your own, because all the notes have been written. Just pick the ones you like.
Well, you know what's really interesting about that is I know that some of the classical guys will, I guess, look down sometimes on someone like John Williams because I guess in some ways it's more simple than your traditional orchestral pieces, but or because it's stolen from there. But I don't see it that way. I see it as he took those ideas that were great for 100 years ago and delivered them in a modern, digestible fashion that obviously resonated with millions of people. And with some of these, like Star Wars or E.T., people will know those themes 100 years from now, same way that the original works are somewhat still known. There's something about the original orchestral music, and I think almost from any era, that I can't help it now that it just, I don't want to say dated, but there's something in their structures that just feels antiquated. I don't want to say dated, because dated is something I think of when I think of 80s metal.
Yeah,
and I don't want to talk down on orchestral music, because it's, you think about things that people have created that are great, like spaceships or skyscrapers. Symphonies are up there with that, but there's something in the delivery and the structure that is just it just feels old. And someone like John Williams has taken lots of those classics and just redone them in a way that works for modern ears. And that's quite a talent.
Yeah, I can agree with you on 90% of that. I think what how it made it palatable for people and influenced people like me when I was a kid, right, is you fall in love with the movie, and the music is such a big part of the movie that you fall in love with the music, right? Like Back to the Future, that theme is great. And it's not really a traditional classical progression or anything, but the idea of taking these kind of, it's almost like what's happening now is you're playing pop music with an orchestra, essentially, right? Because it's not as complex. I'm one of the luckiest guys. So this is a little offshoot, but I work with a film composer named Robert Miller, and if anybody out there knows who Aaron Copland is, he was a super famous American composer. He composed Fanfare for the Common Man. Yeah, that was Robert's mentor. So Robert's taking me under his wing and like kind of showing me the ropes, and he's got his big cool culty movie that everybody loves is Teeth. So he scored Teeth. I don't know if you've ever seen that. But,
actually, yeah.
Yeah. And then last year we did Louis C.K.'s new film that didn't come out. It was great. Robert wrote like these really cool waltzes for it, recorded it in Abbey Road, and it was a cool process to see and be a part of. But I mean, so I'm super lucky that I get to learn from this guy and get to go on this little thing with him. But to answer your question is like, that's kind of how, because he's a true symphonist, right? He comes from a symphonic world, and that's how he kind of talks a lot of, and he looks up to John Williams, right? John Williams is a symphonist first, and he just happened to become a film composer. So a lot of his work in film is easier to digest, I think, probably because of the film. But if you really just look at the score, it's clever music. It's really smart. It's really
it's
smart.
very clever.
Yeah.
Something I've started to do recently, which I encourage people to do, because if for nothing else, it'll give you a different experience watching movies, is when a movie comes out that you want to watch, get the soundtrack first and listen to it over and over and over again.
Yep.
And then go see the movie. And knowing the music before you know what's happening in the movie, it's a whole other experience. And it can actually make a movie that's not that great way cooler.
More interesting.
For instance, I don't think Batman versus Superman was that great of a movie. I think it's okay, but I think a lot of people agree. But I got the Hans Zimmer score well in advance of seeing it, and it's so good. Especially the Wonder Woman theme. It's just so good. And then when it happens, those themes come up on screen, you just know them so well that it's like, it makes the movie way, way better. And it's different. It's a different experience than if you saw the movie and heard the soundtrack for the first time at the same time.
Oh, I agree.
I'm not sure how to describe the difference, but it is very, very different. Or Man of Steel was another one. The Superman movie. That's a great soundtrack, but I heard the soundtrack first, and so then when I saw the actual movie, it hit in a different way. Whereas I don't think I would have definitely liked that movie if I had just seen it without hearing the soundtrack first.
Yeah. No, I mean, I always buy all the movies that I know I'm going to see. I usually, as soon as the soundtrack comes out, they usually come out like 2 weeks before, I think. I usually buy them just because I'm curious, and I do like to see, I try to see what I think the cues are, and then see what actually happens in the movie to be like, oh, okay, I see what he did with that. That's cool.
And how often are you right?
With like the thematic material? Like how it, I mean, it's usually easy to identify the hero and the villain, right? But the subtle stuff is, I mean, I'm never right. You know what I mean? Because it's like I don't know what's going to happen in the movie, but it's fun to like sort of, okay, so if he's using this theme and this theme together, and he's kind of varying it in this way, I wonder what's happening in the scene. Maybe this is happening. Then I'll see it, and it's usually never like what I'm thinking, but it gets your mind turning on how you can see variations being used and how you can have two themes play with each other and all that stuff.
One thing I've always wondered, a little off topic, but it's always fascinated me is, when you see a movie, I'm a Hans Zimmer fan, so I'm just going to bring up Inception. You see a movie like Inception, and the soundtrack is such a huge part of it. I don't want to say it makes the movie, but it's definitely a huge part of what's awesome about it and why it's memorable and powerful. But Christopher Nolan had to have that movie in his head without that music. And so I just wonder what is going through a director's head or the writer's head when they're creating the movie and they don't have like the Inception theme yet. It's interesting.
Yeah. I think it's funny that you mentioned that movie. Don't quote me. Maybe we need to do some research, but I think he had that before they started filming. And I think they played it on set during certain scenes. One of his movies is like that, and I want to say it's Inception, but I might be wrong. Don't quote me on that. But
of course, it would be the one I mentioned.
I know the one you picked.
But it makes perfect sense because that soundtrack is so like, it's like in the DNA. It really actually is in the DNA of that movie. Like apparently what they use as the kick to wake up out of the dreams. The French song is what he built the rest of the soundtrack off of. So like everything in the soundtrack is in the DNA of the visuals.
Oh yeah.
And the story.
I mean, that's the dream thing of, well, Christopher Nolan and Hans Zimmer have like such a long relationship.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing is you know, the few films that I've been a part of, and I do a lot of media composing, right? So the earlier you can get in to talk about story and characters and what's going to happen, the better, because you can help scenes in a way that you can't necessarily do after it's sort of locked picture or they're like almost done. And I like collaborating, I guess was what I'm trying to say. Collaboration is great. Because you can sway a director and you can see something that he or she wasn't seeing before with this idea of a theme, or, you know, like, what is this guy thinking in the scene? Oh, well, if I scored it like this, and it might make him go, oh, if you're doing that kind of thing, wow, I can open up this other idea here. And I don't know, it gets into a cool thing. So the earlier in the process, the better for me. And honestly,
you know, I see a parallel there for production, just straight up music production with bands. Same way that, like, you know, how certain songs mix themselves almost because the arrangement and the songwriting was done so craftfully.
Yep.
Like they were done all so well and with the mix in mind that it just kind of comes together in a way that say that somebody mixes a song that they didn't produce and maybe the arrangement's not wonderful or whatever, they can still pull off a great mix. No question. I mean, obviously, lots of great mixes have been done that way. So obviously it works, but there's something magical that happens when, not to use the word inception, but to use the word inception, it's all there from the inception of the production and the song. Absolutely. And so I guess I never thought of it, but it makes perfect sense that if you could do that in a movie, you would end up with something that is just way more integrated and powerful.
Yep. You're 100% right. And on the production note is, you know, whenever I work with artists, like bands usually either love working with me or they really don't like working with me, because you really have to think about it like I'm going to be your extra member, whatever your fifth or sixth or third or whoever it is, right? And exactly what you said is I love to get in there and just say, cool, you have a song. Your demos, I don't care how long you spend on them, give me an acoustic guitar and a vocal, and we're going to start this thing from scratch. Because that's where, if the song doesn't rock on an acoustic guitar and a vocal, you know what? We're not making anything here. We're just kind of like fucking around. Production's only cool, right? And you won't ever have a record that people want to listen to over and over again, because after the excitement of how cool the production sounds is gone, you're left with nothing. Like you're left with a shell. So you need to build the thing that exists, and then the production should just amplify the thing that already rocks. So
I mean, it's almost like not almost, but I think it definitely is that if you get that part right, where it's built from the ground up the right way, it's almost like you don't need as sparkly of a final mix and master. Yeah. Like it doesn't have to be as, 5-star luxe to be to become a classic. No, it's almost like if the song's not that good, without that top-notch 100% sparkly mix, there's nothing that'll save it.
Yeah, it's true.
Basically,
it's true. Yeah.
Now, if you can get both together, that's
what you want, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's why all these huge pop stars have like literally hundreds, if not 1,000 songs submitted to make a 10-song record. And then they spend, 6 months to a year making 10 songs or whatever, 12 songs, just crafting it over and over and over and over again until it's like, okay, wow, that sounds cool and the song's really good. And now I think we can actually sell 100,000 copies or whatever.
Man, pop production and mixes are so, can I just say that they are so incredible? And I know that everybody is probably going to be like, well, of course they are.
Yeah.
But I mean, really, the pop stuff has always blown me away by how sophisticated it is too. And I think in lots of ways, it doesn't get that genre. And it's hard to say that genre because it's always evolving. But I guess the genre of pop does not get the respect it deserves from quote unquote legitimate musicians side of the fence.
That's so dumb. Yeah.
It's so stupid because
so
I think
dumb.
that's the hardest. I think that's the hardest stuff to make because of the simplicity.
Yes.
Like you were saying before with the simplicity, like to get something that's that simple, yet that unique, yet that powerful, that's another level.
Yeah, I'm with you. I say that all the time. Like if I'm working, so like one of my favorite things to do when I work with a band is I go, tell me 3 bands you want to knock off the charts. Okay. And the reason why I do that is it tells me what their goals are really, right? So if they name like 3 Warped Tour bands, I go, okay, cool. We don't have to be super anal about things because they want to, their aspirations are to be a Warped Tour band. So they're not going to, they're not going for the top 40. So if they name, bands or artists that are top 40 artists, then you go, okay, wow, that's informative. Then we need to really talk because if that's your competition, you really need to think about all these other things that you're going to have to do and have to compete with to really do it. Like there's a reason why, like you said, like pop music is what it is because it's so simple and so well crafted for what it is. It's brilliant. It's the top, the top of their game for that sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, God, and I tell the artists all the time, if it's so, because everybody always goes, oh, that stuff's stupid. It's so easy. And I'm like, man, if it's so easy, show me how to do it. Yeah, make it and tell me how to do it because I want to know. Like, I think it's cool. Like, I love pop music. It's such a great thing for what it is. It's great. Like, just like orchestral music is great for what it is. I love all of it. And I try to, like I said, take it all in and learn from it and figure out stuff. Like one of my favorite things is Mr. Brightside, right? Like this is a great thing about texture, right? If somebody wants to understand, if they're not cluing in on what I mean by texture, is like that melody for that verse is 1 note or maybe 2 notes. I think he goes down a little bit, right? Coming out of my cage and I'm doing just fine, gotta be down, right? So it's like fucking 1 note, but his texture in his voice is what is selling it. And that's where the genius lies, in his delivery, not the notes. So I don't know, but I love that because it's just so simple. It's so simple, but it's such an emotionally powerful song.
Absolutely. So, how you're doing it rather than what you're doing is really what matters. And what's funny? I've always told people that dog on genres or say that something's easy is, if you really think it's that easy, what you should do is go to a local open mic night and wait for the artist that's trying to do that style you're talking shit about. And that's basically what you're going to find there is the average level of people trying a certain genre. And how bad that sounds is basically what the average person would create with pop. And so if the actual stuff that you hear, the pro stuff is like 300 times better, then just think about how much more difficult it would be to create that.
I agree.
So just go listen to the local version at open mic night, and that'll be a good gauge for how difficult it is to create a certain genre of music. Yeah. So speaking of production, it sounds to me like you do get very, very involved from the ground up, like we've said. How did you get to the point where bands allowed you to do that? Because I know a lot of people listening some are well on in their careers, but some are at the very beginning or beginning, middle, to where, they'll make a suggestion and they're dealing with a lot of pushback, or, bands don't necessarily want to go the distance with them. How did you get to the point where that, you had the ability or the clout or the leverage or the respect to be able to get bands to go along with you?
That's a good question. So everything for me was really organic. Like, there was never a plan. I never wanted to be a music producer. I'm not saying that I don't love my job, but I never like sat down and was like, I'm going to be a music producer. What happened was I was in high school, right? So I started playing in bands. I started writing my own songs. One of my friends, my best friend, Tom Bruno, who actually lives in Atlanta, started playing drums in a band called Nuclear Saturday with me. And then we got signed to Vagrant Records for like a hot minute. We were on the 5 Years on the Street CD. I was recording all of our demos, and they were some of the better ones that sounded in town. And then other bands started approaching me, asking me if I could record them. And then I did. And I was working at Starbucks. And then I started charging the bands, like, I don't even remember, like $300 for like 5 songs or something. And then those bands started getting signed. And then I got more work. So then I quit my job at Starbucks. And then... Yes, exactly. And then it was super organic. And like, I just started working with these other bands. And as those bands got signed, labels started contacting me, managers or lawyers. And then I started recording those bands, and then they would get signed, and it kind of just went from there. And then as far as your question on how did bands trust me, I guess, and I hope this doesn't make me sound arrogant or anything, this is not said with any arrogance, is my suggestions were right.
I don't think it sounds arrogant. I think it's interesting that your suggestions were right. Obviously, if the bands liked it and they went on to have success, then you can't argue with the suggestions. But then also, I think that the way, and I've never worked with you, but I'm just guessing that the way that you deliver your suggestions is with 100% confidence, just based on the way you said that. And I think that makes a big difference as to if an artist is going to take the ride with you on something that could be altering their baby.
Yeah. I think, and that helps me actually sort of think about this a little more, is I think, right, the confidence that you're feeling from it is because I could hear it in my head before I said it. So maybe a good suggestion for people is, don't say something because you think it. Say that because you know it. Like, you know that this is going to make it better. And you're going to build trust with the artist. If the first suggestion works good, they're going to go, okay, wow, that's actually a pretty cool idea. And then you're going to go, hey, man, I'm kind of hearing it like this. Can I see your guitar for a second? And they're like, yeah. And then you play it or whatever it is. And then you hand it back and they're like, oh, wow, that is cooler. Okay, let's keep going. And the artist-producer relationship in my mind is, like I said, it's a collaboration. Like, I'm not the guy trying to change you. I'm the guy in the band that's trying to make this thing even better with you. Nobody succeeds by themselves. Everybody succeeds together. The best records I've ever made are not because of me. It's because of all of us. We're in a room together and we all sat down and nobody had an ego, and everybody's, opinion was valuable, and we would try everything. Everything didn't work, but we tried it and we experimented and we took the time. And it wasn't like this one guy's master plan. It was, okay, let's create something for the world to enjoy. Like, let's do this. This is going to be fun.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying this podcast, then you should know that it's brought to you by URM Academy. URM Academy's mission is to create the next generation of audio professionals by giving them the inspiration and information to hone their craft and build a career doing what they love. You've probably heard me talk about Nail the Mix before, and if you're a member, you already know how amazing it is. At the beginning of the month, Nail the Mix members get the raw multi-tracks to a new song by artists like Bring Me the Horizon, Gojira, Asking Alexandria, Machine Head, and Papa Roach, among many, many others. Then, at the end of the month, the producer who mixed it comes on and does a live streaming walkthrough of exactly how they mixed the song on the album and takes your questions live on air. You'll also get access to MixLab, our collection of dozens of bite-sized mixing tutorials that cover all the basics, as well as Portfolio Builder, which is a library of pro-quality multi-tracks cleared for your use in your portfolio, so your career will never again be held back by the quality of your source material. And for those who really want to step up their game, we have another membership tier called URM Enhanced, which includes everything I already told you about and access to our massive library of fast tracks, which are deep, super detailed courses on intermediate and advanced topics like gain staging, mastering, low end, and so forth. It's over 40 hours of content, and man, let me tell you, this stuff is just insanely detailed. Enhanced members also get access to one-on-one office hour sessions with us and Mix Rescue, which is where we open up one of your mixes on a live video stream, fix it up, and talk you through exactly what we're doing at every step. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, if you're ready to level up your mixing skills and your audio career, head over to urmacademy.com to find out more. Man, that idea translates for me also in business big time, especially now, my partners in URM are very, very strong-minded dudes. Mm-hmm. And they're very, very smart. So you can't have shitty ideas. You can. Nobody bats 1,000. But still, it forces me to have to be totally certain when I bring something to the table. And the way that I do that it's a feeling, really. I mean, there's definitely a bunch of data and metrics you can look at, but honestly, even with business, when it comes down to it, even if an idea to me looks good on paper, if it doesn't feel right, I don't even bring it up. And there's oftentimes the ideas I've gotten through that we've all agreed on that have done really well for us involved a certain amount of risk, and there was no real data. I had to explain why I felt comfortable, it was feelings, and I feel that this is going to be successful for this and this and this reason, but it wasn't like because this percentage of people clicked on this or anything like that. It was definitely much more of an emotional thing. And when I felt that way, that strongly about it, it's almost infectious to where it was way easier to get the dudes and the rest of the team to go along with me and to get behind the idea. And the same goes when they present an idea. If they feel half-assed about it, like I can tell, and it's very easy to shoot down. Not that that's what we're trying to do, but part of why you work with people isn't just for the great ideas. It's so that you have partners to shoot down the bad ideas. And the confidence makes that way easier or more difficult. I guess it made me think of the difficulty of working with people who are super confident about bad ideas and what a nightmare that turns into. Yeah. But that I feel like that's not as common in really successful projects, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think on that note is look, you don't learn from success, you learn from failure. So the more things you can try, you're going to fail more often, and you're going to get somewhere cooler faster through that. If you never try anything and just do the one thing, do you know what the definition of insanity is?
Yeah, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results.
Exactly. So don't be insane. Don't be crazy. Don't be so obsessive about a thing. Allow things to fail and allow things to grow and allow things to change. Because once you accept that, you're going to see this thing that started, at point A and now it's at point B, and it's going to be a lot cooler. You just have to be willing to accept that journey.
But that's not a natural, that's like not a natural position to take. I think it's the right position to take, but I think it takes work to be able to, like, it takes mental work and personal work to be able to get to the point where you're comfortable failing. And I mean, it's a very deep thing. And the most successful people I know in any field all say it, that you need to be willing to fall flat on your face.
Yeah.
But I think the reason that so many people say it is because it's not that easy. It doesn't just, you don't just wake up comfortable with falling flat on your face. Falling on your face hurts if you've ever done it. It's not a fun experience. So how did you have to work on that, or did it come more naturally to you, or is it something that evolved over time?
I think, part of that I think is part of my personality, just from the sciencey elements or that whole idea, right? From my family is like, why do you poke the bear? You poke the bear to see what happens. Okay, well now if I poke him at this other spot, what's going to happen, right? So I've always liked that idea to like what's going to happen? I don't know. Let's find out. So, and then on the other side of that is I can think of, there was one year where I could remember writing songs, and the songs I would kind of hoard, and I would go, well, I can't do this because then if I release it, then it's like I won't ever be able to have this song again. And this might be the best song, right? So I would sort of hold this stuff. And then one year I remember I was like, I'm going to write 200 songs this year. I'm going to write a song a day, essentially, is what I told myself. And I did. And I sat down, and every day I would write a song. They weren't all great, but I just did it. And what that taught me is like, oh yeah, there's always another idea. And if there's not, then you need to figure out why there's not another idea, and then get that idea and keep it going. Because if there's not another idea, there's something else going on, right? So you can always write more music. There's always something else that you're not doing. And I would challenge myself. I would write a song with 4 chords. I would write a song with 3 chords. I would write a song 2 chords. And then I wrote a song with 1 chord. And then that's where you get creative. Like, put yourself in these boxes. That's where creativity lies. Like, it's easy to make anything with everything, right? You just grab stuff and you make it. But if you have these barriers, you can't do this thing, then you have to be creative. And that's where other people are going to find it more interest in it too, because they're going to be like, wow, wait, I'm not bored. And it's just this little thing. How did you do that?
That reminds me of, I guess, someone I used to play with in a band. And hey, if any of my ex-band members are listening, this isn't about you, because I've played with like 50 people, so it could be anyone. So don't take. I'm not. I hope I don't start getting hate texts. But so there's this guy that didn't write that much. I was the main writer in every one of my bands. I was a better writer than a player. And so I try to surround myself with better players to make up for that. And so I wrote, say, 90% of the music in all of my bands pretty much. And because of that, I'd say that I got used to ditching about 65% of everything I wrote. Just got trashed, maybe more. And so I got totally comfortable with almost all of my ideas being expendable. I mean, every once in a while, I would feel super strongly about one, and I'd fight for it till the death. And that usually would bear some fruit. That would usually end up being one of the more popular songs, kind of back to what we were saying before about the confidence. But I would just, in general, I would just be okay with ditching my own ideas. Like, we'd go into a production with a producer, and he would like cut out entire sections from my songs, and you just have to be okay with it. And I became okay with it. But there was this one guy that I used to play with who he'd write like 2 songs a year. And so he'd really be into those 2 songs, and he'd present them. And so if you wanted to make any changes, Like, say that even if he only wrote 2 songs, like, I still would want to put it through the same scrutiny as if it was one of my own. It doesn't matter who's presenting it. It's still going to go through the same quality control. But because he had way less output as a writer, every one of those riffs or parts meant that much more to him. So that made it that much more difficult to cut out the bad riffs, which I thought was a very negative thing. And you contrast that to where I've either produced or played with guys who are just prolific writers, writing, just always coming up with something. They typically have no problem with, you don't like something? Cool, we'll change it. Unless they feel super strongly about it. But that's not as often as you would think.
Yeah. No, you're right. I like the super strong thing. You made me think of this thing that I can, maybe this is good advice for somebody, maybe, is I was watching, I love Young Frankenstein. And I was watching like a behind the scenes, and they were talking about the scene with the monster and Dr. Frankenstein, right? And they're where they're doing the tap dancing bit, right? And Mel Brooks was like, "This is stupid. Like, this is not funny. We should not put this in the movie." And then Gene Wilder like got really upset and like fought for it and was like, "No, this is funny. You have to believe me." And Mel Brooks was like, "Okay, if you're this passionate about this thing, then I'm just not seeing what you're seeing, and we'll leave it in the movie." And that's arguably one of the funniest moments in that movie. So when I heard him say that, I made a mental note to always be that guy, that if somebody is fighting for something, then I'm missing the thing. It's not them, right? It's not the song, or it's not whatever. It's not the production. I'm the one missing it. So I need to let them have this thing, because clearly I'm not getting it, and maybe I'll get it later.
Wise, very, very wise. I'm sure that's yielded some great results.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Some of the coolest stuff, because look, I'm not the end all be all. Nobody is. And the sooner you can accept that, you can open yourself up to more experiences and being wowed by something you never thought you could be wowed by, which is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been talking for a while, and I want to make sure I get this stuff in before we go. So we've got some questions from our listeners for you.
Oh, okay.
That I'd like to throw at you. So here's one from Matt Sandstrom, which is, Hurley by Weezer is one of my favorite albums. How did you manage to make songs like Ruling Me and Hang On sound so poppy and fun, yet alive and not overproduced? Also, I'd like to know about what it was like working on an album as one of 3 mixers. What level of coordination and communication was there between you and the others?
That's a good question. So there was no communication between the other mixers and me. It was kind of like, at that time, so Breck Erwitz was managing me at that time. And he basically, I don't think he gave me the whole record. I think the plan was to give it out to a few people. So the songs that he fed me were, I don't even remember. Ruling Me, Hang On, and like 3 or 4 others. And we didn't talk to each other. It was kind of like, let's just make these songs. And I encourage people to do this, right? Some people are like, well, it's got to sound like a record. Records don't sound like records. Records are just a collection of songs. You got to make the song speak and do the best it can be, and then it will sound good. And hopefully the other mixers on the thing did a great job, and then everybody sounds good next to each other, and you never question, is this a different mixer? Is this a different recording? Is this a different whatever? It doesn't really matter, at least in my opinion. And then as far as making those sound so raw but poppy at the same time, I remember Hang On having 2 drum kits in it, and like the verse is different than the chorus. And again, like I'm gonna accept whatever I'm given. So I'm not gonna make that song into what I wish it was recorded like, or wish it was. I'm gonna take what I have. I'm gonna think about it and go, okay, well now I have Okay, I'm remembering exactly what it was. I had a mono room mic and a kick drum track for the verse, and then the chorus was a full drum set, full like mic'd the whole shebang. So instead of going, oh man, I need to get these drums or I need to put in all these samples and do all this other stuff, I was like, okay, cool. This is what the cards were dealt. This is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna make all the guitars mono. I'm gonna make the kick drum, and everything's gonna be mono in the verse. And when the chorus happens, I'm gonna pan everything as wide as it can be. I'm gonna make the stereo rooms be really noticed by this big drum hit right before it comes in, and everything splits out. And then the next verse, everything's gonna get small and mono again. So that was my plan. And that's kind of like how that song, I guess I would relate that with like super raw, is like this verse is super raw, and then the chorus kind of comes in and it explodes and gets a little polished, big, open, wide sound. And then Ruling Me, that was, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm thinking about it. Yeah, I mean, I think a similar kind of thing with that is, try to make the verses as, tight and verse-like as possible and try to blow up the chorus. And I think a lot of that record was recorded like in a lot of different locations and quickly. So, and again, my philosophy is like, if you have a crappy sounding kick drum, if it sounds bad, right, and you can't get that bad thing to sound as good as the best sounding thing, then the best sounding thing is the bad thing. So that way you have to make everything else work with the worst sounding thing. So whatever it is, and I know this sounds counterintuitive, but if you do that, then your mix will sound good because everything relates to each other. So I try to take everything that I'm given and make it, that's what I got. So I'm just going to make this thing rock. And you're going to get a more unique sound, right? You're not going to be able to reproduce that thing over and over and over again. Like drum samples, right? I own a drum sample company. I use drum samples. I'm not going to say that I don't. I do. But I like the idea of not getting a mix and already killing all the drums and putting it in my samples, right? I use samples for reinforcement because you don't want a bunch of records to sound the same over and over and over and over again. You want a unique sound for each record, and you have to do that by capturing lightning in a bottle, by mic choice and how you record it or how you mix it, or don't just put all the stock stuff you normally do because you know how to do that one thing. Don't do that. You'll have your sound regardless because you're going to make certain mix choices that somebody else wouldn't make, and that's your sound. It's not about the tonality of things. That's kind of like the way I see it.
That's a great answer.
Well, thank you.
That's a great answer. It makes me think of something that I always tell people when they ask about how do you develop your unique sound, whether it's as a musician or producer. And my opinion is don't even really worry about it. Just try to get good because your unique sound will come through no matter what, because
it's you.
You are you.
Yeah, exactly. You're a unique. You are the anomaly, right? Like you're the thing that is only one of, and how you think about it, and it goes back to, again, right? Just don't go on autopilot when you start mixing or tracking or recording, right? Be you, be a human being, be the human being that you are. And if you allow yourself to be human and think about things and don't just go to a stock thing that you normally do and go, okay, wait, I know I want this kind of guitar sound, but that texture, if I can get this kind of texture, it might make somebody feel more like what the song is about. And that's what I want to create. So now I got to figure out how to get that texture, whatever that is.
And that's actually my counter argument when I'm trying to get mixers to come on Nail the Mix. Sometimes their objection is, well, I don't want to give out my secrets. And I understand. However, I completely disagree.
Yeah, me too.
Because the one thing that they cannot give out, no matter how hard they try, is their brain.
Yep.
And their ears that are attached to that brain. Yep. And so no matter if someone watches the entire Nail the Mix session and goes through and screenshots every single plugin move and tries to recreate it,
it's not gonna be the same.
Think it's still not going to work. And we know that. We know that because we've done so many of them now.
Yeah.
That if Like, so actually, before we started having guests on, myself and my partners were the ones who did it. And so I don't know if you've heard of one of my partners, Joey Sturgis.
Yeah,
but
of course.
He, okay, so you know that he basically was behind a whole genre of heavy music. Like he created his own sound. And so you would think that with the amount of people who have tried to imitate it or who think that it's just presets or something, who have watched him on Nail the Mix multiple times, you would think that they would be able to just make mixes as good as his, that sound just like his, if it really was, if that's really all there was to it. But it's not.
No.
And so it doesn't matter. Really, all you're doing by doing Nail the Mix is showing people how you would solve a particular problem.
That's right.
But then how they then translate that into their own workflow is a whole separate topic.
Yeah.
So, all right, here's another question. This one is from Runar Magnuson. Another two-part question. So, what are some common mistakes or bad habits among the up-and-coming bands or artists you work with, like in their songwriting, work ethic, and practicing? And how much creative input do you have when working with bands like Bad Religion and Weezer, who seem to have a very strong creative vision?
Yeah. So no creative input for Bad Religion. No. I mean, Brett, those guys. Yeah, no. Those guys know what they're. I'm not going to suggest.
Hey, sometimes the best thing you can do is get out of the way.
Oh yeah. And same with Weezer. I mixed Weezer and I produced a couple songs for us. Rivers does this Japanese thing with my friend Scott, who used to play in Alistair. It's called Scott Rivers, and I've produced like a couple songs for them. But the creative input is for those size bands. They are who they are because of their creative input, right? So you don't really need to guide people like that. I'd imagine it's like Muse is like the same thing. Like you're not going to be like, "Hey, Matthew Bellamy, do this thing." He's going to give you a look and be like, "I think I know what I'm doing here."
I couldn't imagine trying being the guy on that gig and trying to tell him what to do or something.
Right. But and to give the other side of that is bands that size and that caliber, what I think, and that talented, right? They have a clear vision. I think what you can bring to the table is texture, right? Like you can bring in a way that you record something or layer something or think about their production that they might not be seeing. So that's how you can have your influence in creating a sound of a record for them. It's, again, I know I keep using this word like texture. It's so important. The color of a song, it really matters. And then what was the first part of that question?
What are some common mistakes or bad habits among the up-and-coming bands or artists you work with, like in terms of songwriting or work ethic or practicing?
Okay, so the first thing I usually see is, so my wife, she has this saying, and it's totally true. Out of the 17 years I've been doing this professionally, she can be like, that band's going to make it, and make it could be get a record deal or do well or whatever, right? Not like the biggest band in the world. And she can tell which bands are going to do that and which bands aren't. And she says, she has a saying is the bands that aren't going to do it, their ethic is they're waiting for a letter. So they're these bands that come in and they go, man, we're going to do it. We're going to do all this stuff. We're working with a producer. So in their minds, they're like, we're a real band. And they just sit back. They don't put in the time. They don't put in the ethic, the work ethic to try to write a new part or make their songs better than what they are at that moment. And they just sit there and they think one day they're going to open their mailbox and they're going to get a letter and it's going to say, "Congratulations, you're a rock star." And that never happens. One of the hardest working bands I ever worked with that I saw the whole thing happen was Ludo. And they started out as a local band in St. Louis, right? And St. Louis is not a big city. It's not like famous for being, a great birthplace for rock bands or whatever, right? So you can't argue that they were at the right place. They just played shows and wrote great songs and just worked their asses off. They basically said, we're not going to work jobs. We're only going to make money through music. How can we do that? And then that's what they did. And we did demos and they got signed to Island. We had a top 10 single. And, you know, they were great. I wish they didn't take a hiatus or broken up or whatever they are now, but those guys are super talented, great guys. And it just shows you just work hard and just keep going and like, don't settle. Just don't settle. You can always get better. If you're not crafting your song up until the time that recording button goes on, then you're really not doing everything you can to make it great.
I totally agree with you with everything you just said. It makes me think of that sometimes I've just heard, you know, sometimes lots I've heard that people think that when you have a successful artist or band that somehow they got lucky or it was handed to them or they had a rich parent or, you know, something along those lines. And sometimes they do have a rich parent or a connection, but that's only enough to get you in the door. It's definitely not going to keep you there. And contrast that, man, I know so many successful musicians and producers who come from the worst backgrounds, who had nothing handed to them, who have some of the most tragic lives. I guess the first part of their lives, like some of the most tragic upbringings you could think of, and just bad luck along the way and terrible stories who have just gotten through and had incredible careers. And and then I've seen guys who have come from everything. Money, end up in prison or something, and totally destroy their own careers. I think it has nothing to do with it, and it has everything to do with what you bring to the table and just how deep you're willing to go. Yeah, and for how long. Exactly, how long. And if I can add on that is being able to recognize everybody's not great at everything, right? Like I'm not like the best player in the world. You know, whatever your weaknesses, you need to recognize that and then find a way to get that up to where your strengths are. You know, whatever that stuff is, look at yourself and go, okay, what do I really need to improve at? Like, where are my faults? And you can't compare yourself to somebody like Chris Lord-Alge that's 60 years old or whatever and been doing it since he was 14 because he's got all those years on you. So you have to look at like, what are your strengths for right now? Like, what am I really good at? Okay, well, that's great because that seems to take care of itself, whatever that thing is. So all these other things are my fault. So that's the stuff I need to work on. I don't know music theory. I don't know how to put together songs really well. Well, let me learn about that. You know, I don't have to stick to the theory, but at least if I can understand it, when these problems arise, I'll have a starting point to be able to solve it. Or work with team members who complement your weaknesses. There you go. Boom. Like either way, it's the end result is the same. Like I said before, that's exactly what I did in my bands. And I remember once I had a fight with somebody. The guy was trying to insult me, and he said that basically I got this other guy in my band so I could ride his coattails as a guitar player because he's a fucking phenomenal guitar player. And it's like, well, no, actually, no. That's not it at all. Because, you know, I'm the guy who got us the record deal and did all the networking and wrote most of the music and put it together. But I knew that I wasn't that great of a player. So I found someone who is and let him do most of the tracking. It's you know, it was we worked, you know, he benefited from what I was good at as much as I benefited from what he was good at. And so that argument doesn't work. And it's the same thing in, you know, bring up my business partners now. For instance, Joey is good at computer stuff in a way that I could never be and will never be. Like, it's just the way his brain works. And he also has that background. Like, he knew how to code. He used to work at a computer store. Like, that is in his background. And that's not me. I'm not the guy You're not that guy, I'm not the guy who jumps into the software and fixes it. I'm I have a whole different skill set, and that's, to me, that's part of what works is figuring out what you're not good at, and like you said, either you learn how to do it or you find someone else who does. I mean, that's what Steve Jobs did.
You know, he's not a software guy.
Yeah.
He hired great software people because he knew he was an idea guy and needed somebody to fill the void that he couldn't do. I mean,
It's funny. It's so funny when people talk shit about him, like somehow being the visionary is a bad thing.
Yeah.
Like I don't get it. So what if he didn't do the actual coding? That's
cares?
okay. Obviously, it worked.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So here is another question. This one is from Michael Goodrich. And do you mix differently for projects you know will be played on the radio a lot compared to more up-and-coming acts that just want to sound good?
Oh, no.
Sounds like a loaded question.
Yeah, it does. No, not at all. You know, I want everything to sound the best it can for what it is. Again, you know, I sit here and I open the session and I just start mixing the song as if it was, you know, Weezer or whoever. To me, it doesn't matter. It's music. I want to just make it sonically cool and do the song justice.
It's like back, you know, when I was talking about Billy Decker and the country stuff.
Yep.
Like I said earlier, there's no difference in the quality between the superstar and the up-and-comers. They all sounded great. And I know that Billy will tell you over and over and over that it doesn't matter if the person paying him has sold 10 million records or 100 records. He's going to go for it the same way.
Yep. No, it's true.
Also, what sounds loaded about that question is saying up-and-coming acts that just want a good sound. Like, does that mean that radio bands don't want a good sound?
Yeah.
I don't totally understand.
I think, you know, this is the thing that I can maybe and again, I'm trying to like assume what experience he's had to lead him to this question. The thing that I can say is maybe that if you've had a poor experience hiring a bigger mixer or somebody like that, is the tracking, right? You can only make you can only mix what you're given. So if the tracks were recorded poorly, and again, the mix might be good for what you were given, but you might hear a record that costs, you know, $40,000 to make or whatever that was in a proper studio, and you're going to go, well, why doesn't it sound like that? You can only mix what you're given. So if the tracks are, and I don't want to say subpar because it's all a taste thing, right? Like what we would call a shitty sounding record could be the perfect thing for somebody. So if your tracks are not what you want them to sound like, the mixer cannot make them sound any different than what you give them. So you have to get it at the tracking stage, that sound that you're looking for.
Man, and how true does that become with mastering too?
Oh yeah, you know? Masters like, do anything.
It's so important to get it right from the inception. So, all right, here's the last question, and this one also sounds a little bit loaded, but I know this guy in real life, and I know it's not a loaded question. So I'm going to ask you his question, and then I'm going to add my own ending to it.
Okay.
So this is from Miami Dolphin, and by the way, that is his real name.
That's amazing. I love that.
I've seen his driver's license.
That's awesome.
It actually is Miami Dolphin.
So he's probably from like Ohio or something, right?
Actually, his handle on somewhere is Cleveland Brown.
Oh, that's great.
So
that's great.
I was about to say I think he's from Ohio, but actually I think he's from Virginia.
Ah, that's great. I love it.
Just probably was born to some Miami Dolphins fans.
Yeah, big time.
For real. So here it is. Hey, Mark, I know you are also a member of Sound Better. Do you think it's possible for up-and-comers that hustle to make a living solely off of work for hire sites like that? Or do you think that because there are already platinum mixers like yourself or Jeff Giuliano that it doesn't make sense? And then I'm going to add my own ending, which is, what do you think that up-and-comers can do to compete against the entrenched players?
That's a good question. And it's funny because I've actually thought about that before. So I use Sound Better, not really. I use it to like fill my book, right? So I do cheaper mixes on there to just sort of fill in the time that I need to get filled. And I'll turn down work on there. And if there's a cool project that I see pop up, like today I saw like a film pop up for, they needed a score. So yeah, I'm going to go after that. So yeah, I mean, it's like easy to get in contact with people like me and Jeff. I sold Jeff, I used to have a 33609 with serial number 3. And I sold it to Jeff, and
wow.
And I still regret it, but Jeff's a good guy. So how do you get that right? How do you get around people like us? You can undercut us and then over deliver. That's one way. And then like anything, you build a name and get these people to review you. Try to get your 5 stars and post that everywhere. Another thing is I think people probably really go on there and listen to whatever your offerings are, like your demos or projects you've worked on before. So make sure that those are just like solid demos. So you can't argue with the quality, right? So if you have something on there that's just perfect for an artist, go for it. Submit to every job you can at the beginning. I know it's like tough. It's like, how do you do this thing that all these other people are in your way? You're like the guy at the back of the crowd, jumping, going like, hey, but I'm here too. I get it. Shit. I wish I had better advice. Work with as many local bands as you can. I'm sure this is the same advice everybody does. Work for free until you become in demand. I was lucky enough to be in a different time, right? The internet wasn't really as prominent as it was now. The bands were still a thing. It wasn't like 2 guys that wanted to write music when I started. So, it was just very different. And I feel lucky to be able to have been a part of that. But yeah, the best advice, work for free, work as much as you can, never say no. And if you're only going to get better because you're working more, and hopefully you get so good that people just have to work with you and they'll pay whatever it takes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that by trying to make a living solely off of a site like Sound Better, you're definitely
not gonna
shooting down. Yeah, you're like kind of limiting your options there quite a bit. And I also think that, and this is going to go contrary to what I know a lot of our students think, but I don't really think that there's too much you can do as a producer to really market yourself in the way that a business does.
Yeah.
Like really, I mean, you can to a degree, but really what makes the majority of a difference as a person that makes audio for a living, as a producer, mixer, writer, is what people think of your work and what they tell other people who would potentially hire you. I think that's like 90% of it really right is. There. And then the other 10% would be the marketing you can do online. And like a great example of someone who markets the shit out of himself is Chris Lord-Alge.
Yep.
But I mean, the dude is already a phenom. Like
he's at the top already. So
yeah, the only difference that I think it's made is that maybe there's some guys who are at his level, as far as skill and maybe record sales, who aren't as known to the younger generation just because they're not on a million plugins and doing like every seminar that they can. So like, I'm sure that it's helped a little bit, but I don't think that it's made a difference to him. Whereas like he's now a rich guy, and before he wouldn't have been, or something.
Right.
Now he's sold 30 million albums, whereas before he would have only sold 2. It's I think it's just a small incremental thing. And so I see lots of up and comer guys who study marketing, and I think that that's great, and it can't hurt that much, but they focus on it way too much. And I get it when you, especially if you're learning from something like URM or whatever, we market like crazy, but we are a business. So we have to sell a volume of products or subscriptions in order to be able to keep the lights on. It's
different.
It's totally different. It's not like a one-to-one thing where you are with an artist or in a project for 6 weeks straight or something like that. And, you only need one at that particular time period in order to do okay. It's not the same thing at all. Mm-hmm. And I just think that Miami, I know for a fact that you are a hustler and work your ass off. And that right there is like the guy moved, for instance, he moved from Virginia to LA, put himself into massive debt in order to get his career further, and it worked. He immediately got in with some good people, and his budgets are going up, and he's getting a lot of work, and he's making it happen. But it's definitely not because of a site like Sound Better. No. Not that hurts, but it's because he actually made the sacrifice and has worked on his craft. Like, I remember, for instance, at one point he got an internship with one of the guys who had come on Nail the Mix. And that guy was Pro Tools only. And at the time, Miami only knew Reaper. And so the guy asked me about him, and I was like, look, I'm not going to tell you to definitely take him or definitely not take him, but give him a chance to at least get it under his belt. And I know that the dude's a hard worker, and, give him a time limit. If he can't handle it in 2 weeks or whatever, just move on. But as soon as he had that opportunity, I know that he basically stayed up for 2 weeks straight to teach himself Pro Tools. And it worked, that's what works.
Yeah, that is what works. He'll be successful as long as he keeps that mentality. He'll be successful because you're only a failure if you allow yourself to fail. So if you keep pushing, then you're not failing. You're just working through a rough spot.
Exactly. And the stuff like Sound Better or Noise Creators or whatever, that's very, very good for just keeping your visibility up, which is always good, staying top of mind. And obviously, the more successful you already are, the more that it will yield, like you said, it helps fill the calendar. Yeah. But man, imagine if you were starting your career now and you're like, okay, Sound Better. That's how I'm going to make this one.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, no, I wouldn't. I wouldn't put all my eggs in that basket. What do you have to do? You have to sign up, and that's it, right? So let that thing just kind of be what it is, and then go work your ass off. And then those will be the little things you'll be like, oh, cool, I made $300 or $400 extra this week that I didn't think I was going to make.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm sure that Fiverr is very similar. And, I know that Fiverr has a reputation for having some horrible people on it as far as, whatever it is that you hire people for. But I am sure that there's also some brilliant people on there who make a killing off it, but also make a killing in real life. Yep. And just use Fiverr as one more income source.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, look, the younger people that haven't been doing this that long, they're going to find, if they stick with it, they're going to find everything happens in waves. You're going to get so busy. You're going to be like, oh my God, how am I going to do all this stuff? And then you're going to be so dead. You're going to be like, oh my God, I'm never going to work again. And then all of a sudden it gets super busy again. It's just how the nature of the business and the nature of it, that's just how it works.
Yeah. And there's no real getting around that part.
Yeah. Except for yourself that it's going to be a kind of crazy, no security sort of life for sure.
Man, I can tell you, even my dad, who has done great in the orchestral world, it is still at this point, he still has to think about maybe not the next gig, but, 2 years from now, which orchestra is he going to be with? That's still a fact of life.
Absolutely. I mean, the guy, Robert Miller, that I work with, he's scored 65 films and 2,500 commercials. over his career.
Wow.
And yeah, it's like, I mean, ridiculous. Like all the Coke polar bear stuff. I could just name a million commercials, and like we just did the new Coke campaign. So if you guys see that, it's Hall of the Mountain King reimagined for all these Coke graffiti spots that come up, and every spot has that same running thread.
Can we find it on YouTube?
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure. Just
okay, then we're going to put it in the show notes, actually. So if you go to urm.academy and find this episode, just look at the show notes and we'll have some of those in there.
Oh, cool. Yeah, yeah. I'll send them to you. But yeah, Robert did that. He was in the orchestra was recorded at Fox in LA. So yeah, I mean, look, it's the same thing. Like with his pedigree and his volume of work that he's done and his reputation in the business, it's still like, look, there's periods where we're like, oh, okay, we only got a couple commercials right now. And then there's times where it's just like, oh my God, how are we going to actually last week was like that. It was like, how are we going to finish all of this right now? But you get through it and then it just keeps coming in waves, up and down, up and down.
Yeah.
Self-employment.
Yeah. That is what it is. If you're not good with it, you may not last.
No. Yeah, it's true.
Marc, thank you so much for coming on. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you.
Real.
I love it. Yeah, I would love to do anything with you guys that you have. I would love to do it. I love doing this stuff. We
would love to have you. I mean, I can tell that you're into this. You're very, very well spoken, and it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for having me.
To get in touch with the URM podcast, visit urm.com/podcast and subscribe today.